right, everyone. Hello and welcome. This is Dustin Gannay, and you've reached Open Minds, Open Hearts. And this is session 21, bringing awareness to anxiety. I think I'm pretty excited about this session. Anxiety is usually not something that brings up a lot of excitement, but when we talk about alleviating and bringing more awareness to our anxiety, I think this is something that we could all use a little bit more of. And I have some gems from Dr. Jud Brewer, who's a neuroscientist and MD, who just wrote a new book recently, Unwinding Anxiety. And so we're going to dive into some of the insights from that book and how it relates to meditation and mindfulness. So, and then we'll get into a rain meditation as well. That has a few unique twists inspired by Jud Brewer's book. So it should be an interesting one. So we'll dive into that in a minute. In case you missed the last session, session 20, remember to breathe. Check it out. It's up on wherever you listen to the podcast now. I'm up on all the major channels at this point. Just got on Pandora recently as well as Apple, iPod, Google, Amazon, you name it, really in a lot of channels. So you can check out the last session, session 20, on the audio version or the video version as well on YouTube, or more resources as well on my website, openmindsopenhearts.org. And as always, these are free sessions that I do the first and third Wednesday of every month at 5 p.m. Pacific. But if you would like to leave a donation, it's always welcome. You can do so via my website, openmindsopenhearts.org/donate. And all your contributions go back into the show and paying for the technology and platforms that I use to broadcast to everyone out there. So appreciate that. But with that, let's go ahead and get started on our topic today, bringing awareness to anxiety. So I think this one definitely came up for me, not only because I do work full time for a company during the day and have many of the stresses that a lot of folks do at home. I have two kids that I'm trying to raise during the pandemic as we're kind of trying to see the light at the end of the tunnel here. So I certainly have my share of anxiety in life and stress. And so reading this book from Dr. Jud Brewer, Unwinding Anxiety, definitely was a really key eye-opener for me and some great insights that I wanted to share with you guys. But I know, anxiety, we all experience a certain level of anxiety, even if we don't call it an anxiety disorder, or if we don't have a level at which it hits a panic attack. Certainly just living in a modern society, we all have a certain level of anxiety and stress and worry about the future specifically that we're grappling with. So before we get into some of the content, let's go ahead and set an intention for our session today, like we generally do. So some intentions could be, my intention is to recognize and become aware of the fear, anxiety, and uncertainty that I'm experiencing. My intention is to find inner peace, even when the things outside of me are chaotic. My intention is to practice nurturing self-compassion for myself during difficult times. So go ahead and just take a minute to reflect on your intention for today's session, or the rest of today, the rest of the week, your intention around bringing greater awareness to your anxiety, your stress, fear, uncertainty. And usually your intention that comes to the surface first is the right path to follow. So let's go ahead and move forward with that. Okay, so I did want to share a few quotes with you guys around anxiety and living in the present moment. First quote from Eckhart Tolle. If you're not familiar, he's written The Power of Now, A New Earth. Really kind of one of the more inspiring New Age spiritual thinkers of our time. And he says, all negativity is caused by a denial of the present. Unease, anxiety, tension, stress, worry, fear are caused by too much future and not enough presence. Guilt, regret, resentment, grievances, sadness, bitterness, non-forgiveness are caused by too much past and not enough presence. So I think that's just a really kind of powerful, a powerful recipe of kind of future thinking and past thinking, and how that takes us out of the present moment. And really much of our negativity comes from future thinking, right? So anxiety, tension, stress, worry, fear, much of that is all future based, right? Like we're worried about money situations in the future, or family situations in the future, personal challenges that we may have that are on the horizon that haven't happened yet. Much of that is all based in the future and not the present moment. Whereas the guilt, regret, resentment, grievances, bitterness, that comes from a reflection on the past, and not a healthy reflection, but kind of festering in the past and beating ourselves up over the past, or thinking about other people in a negative way and kind of festering on that. So when we can start to become aware and mindful of when we start to go into those different modes, I think that's the power that Eckhart Tolle is talking about right now. Is all of these things lead to not enough present moment awareness. And that's what we're trying to get at with meditation and mindfulness practice, is that present moment awareness. Next quote from Lao Tzu, author of Tao Te Ching, and really kind of one of the better known philosophers of China. He says, watch your thoughts, they become words. Watch your words, they become actions. Watch your actions, they become habits. Watch your habits, they become character. Watch your character, it becomes your destiny. And this is also just a really profound kind of succession of actions and thoughts and how they manifest ultimately into our destiny. But really, it starts with our thoughts and our words, right? And when we think about anxiety, much of this is happening at an internal level, right? Like we're getting anxious about the future, and we potentially can create a war within our heads because we're so worried about this uncertainty of the future. And we have so much fear about this future state that hasn't even manifested itself yet. And yet in our heads, we've told ourselves that these horrible things have already happened, and our body starts to react. The cortisol starts to release, the stress hormone cortisol. And so we start to get tense. We start, our breath starts to shorten and tighten. These habits, right? It starts as a thought and then it becomes a habit. And when we get into Unwinding Anxiety by Dr. Jud Brewer, he talks a lot about how anxiety ultimately starts through bad habits, essentially. So this idea that our habit becomes our character is really powerful, because a lot of times we identify ourselves as our habit, right? Like if we're clinically diagnosed as having anxiety, maybe perhaps we get on medication, and perhaps we really do have a clinical issue with anxiety. But as Dr. Jud Brewer talks about in his book, for many people, medication doesn't even work when addressing anxiety. But when they start to become aware of these mental patterns and these thought loops that start the anxiety in the first place, as they bring more awareness and mindfulness to those habit loops, then they're actually able to not only address their anxiety, but actually cure their anxiety, because now they become aware of the thought loops that are creating the anxiety in the first place. So there's a lot of power in this statement, and how our thoughts become feelings and behaviors and actions that ultimately affect our character and our destiny. So really profound teaching from Lao Tzu. And then finally, the Dalai Lama, as I'm sure many of you are familiar with the Dalai Lama, one of the foremost teachers of Buddhism in the world as we know it. He says, the moment you develop a sense of concern for others, you realize they also want happiness. Your mind automatically widens. At this point, your own problems will not be so significant. The result, big increase in peace of mind. So if you think only of yourself, the result is actually less happiness. You get more anxiety, more fear. So this is wonderful and wise, naturally, from the Dalai Lama. This idea that when we develop compassion, when we cultivate compassion, our mind expands and widens, mind and heart widens, opens. And as we become more expansive in our perspective and in our awareness, then a lot of these issues of anxiety, fear, anger, suffering, a lot of those things start to become less important, because our awareness our aperture has widened, our vision has expanded to take in the needs and experiences of others besides ourselves, to look outside of ourselves. So it while we also are cultivating our inner qualities, when we begin to expand our awareness, we're able to take on a lot more and look outside of our own needs and start to be able to look at the needs of others with compassion and empathy. And ultimately that helps us with our own issues and anxieties and fears, because we're in that expansive state rather than that contracted state. We're in a growth mindset. We're not in a fixed mindset. So I really love that quote from the Dalai Lama. Okay. So those are just a few quotes that I thought you guys would like. And kind of speaking a little bit more about this book, Unwinding Anxiety by Dr. Jud Brewer. He's a psychiatrist, neuroscientist, and author and mindfulness expert. Really a bright guy. And so in his book, essentially, he's done a lot of research around habits, habit formation, addiction, and anxiety. And he's kind of tied it all together in this book, Unwinding Anxiety. And essentially what he talks about is that anxiety starts from thoughts and becomes a habit. And he calls it a habit loop. And so we can essentially have positive healthy habit loops, and we can have negative, unhealthy habit loops. And so many of these habit loops that cause anxiety, obviously, they start from a place of worry and fear, and he basically says that anxiety is fear plus uncertainty, right? And that when he defines addiction is defined as a continued use despite adverse consequences. So he takes this definition of addiction as continued use despite adverse consequences and relates that back to habits, right? And how many of us have habits where we're experiencing adverse consequences, right? Like we all struggle with bad habits, whether that is sugar, alcohol, drugs, cigarettes, even just emotional reactions to things or certain thought loops, right? We all have these habits that we're grappling with. And so really, as Dr. Jud describes in his book, it's challenging because we have a brain that's mostly very old technology that's from the caveman days, essentially. And that's basically where this habit loop comes from. It comes from the days when we were hunting, gathering, and essentially what you have in this habit loop is you have a trigger, a behavior, and a reward, right? So the trigger during the caveman days was, oh, I see a berry. Maybe I should eat that berry. The behavior is to eat the berry. And the reward, if it was edible and good for us, the reward was, oh, I feel good. Let me have some more. Oh, I have more energy now, right? And so that type of reward-based learning has been built into us for millions of years of human evolution, right? So very powerful. And this is all happening in very old parts of the brain. However, the newer part of the brain, the prefrontal cortex, the part right at the front, responsible for imagination, for executive thinking, logic, rationale, creativity, all of these more high-level functions are happening in the newer part of the brain. Now, the problem is when we're triggered by stressful events, our executive functioning in prefrontal cortex part of the brain goes offline, right? And we start going back into that fight, flight, or freeze part of the brain, the old part of the brain. And so a lot of our habit loops are based on that relationship in the brain, right? So one of the common examples that Dr. Jud talks about in the book, cigarette smokers, right? You're at work and your boss makes you upset. You get stressed out. You go outside. You smoke a cigarette. You get a quick reward, maybe a nicotine buzz, maybe a little fresh air. But the reward overall doesn't really compare to all the negative aspects of smoking the cigarette. And so when you start to bring mindfulness and awareness to that, what seems like a reward, which is the cigarette, as people start to bring mindfulness and awareness to that, they start to realize, hey, actually smoking a cigarette is not a reward. Actually, this tastes really bad. And so the same kind of thing can be said for anxiety habit loops as well. So we're kind of bringing more awareness, nonjudgemental curiosity when we're triggered and when we start falling into one of those negative habit loops. And so in his book, in Unwinding Anxiety, he kind of goes through a lot of different examples and use cases, some really powerful stuff, essentially through this type of program and through using app-based learning, like a mindfulness app that he actually has, the Unwinding Anxiety app. You can find that on the App Store as well. By using these types of apps and by committing to a regular cadence of mindfully checking in with oneself, he's found that this program is actually 5 times more effective than the traditional anxiety care, which is essentially prescribing drugs. So 5 times more effective than prescribing drugs when it comes to addressing anxiety. So really powerful teachings that Dr. Jud Brewer is working on. He's really kind of bringing science and mindfulness and integrating those two practices together in a very meaningful way with peer-reviewed research to go along with it. I could probably talk about this book for a while, but I'll just kind of close with this example that he shares from the book, from his own personal life. So he lives on the East Coast, and he works in a hospital, and he rides his bike to work. And he lives in Providence, Rhode Island, which is a busy city, and there's a lot of traffic. And so when he started riding his bike to work, naturally there was people that were cutting him off, drivers that were not very safe, and he was in some dangerous situations being on that bike. And his natural reaction was to get angry. Sometimes so angry that he might flip them a bird or something not so tasteful. And so he started to realize he was getting to the hospital really stressed out, which wasn't helping his psychiatry patients, because he's here to help them with their mental health. And he's getting to the hospital in this flustered, frustrated state. So what he did was he noticed, number one, became aware of his negative habit loop. And then once he was aware of it, then he could start to play around with it and start to hack the habit loop a little bit. So what happened is, when a driver would honk at him or cut him off, rather than getting upset like he used to, he decided he would send loving kindness to himself and to the driver when that happened. He would just send a little prayer of loving kindness. I send myself loving kindness. I send you loving kindness. And that one little shift in the habit loop made an instrumental difference in his life. He noticed that not only did he feel better when somebody was cutting him off, but now he was bringing that energy and that enthusiasm with him to work. And so much to the point that he realized, like, well, hey, I don't need to get cut off to actually do this practice. Like, I just need to do loving kindness practice more often. And so, then he started doing more loving kindness, not just for people that were on his good side, but for also people that may have almost hit him in their car while he's riding his bike. So it seems counterintuitive, but it's a super powerful practice to become aware of those habit loops that are creating anxiety in our lives. And then figuring out ways that we can start to replace that negative reward. So flipping somebody the bird, even though it may feel good at the moment, that's a negative reward. Replacing that with a positive reward, like blessing that person with loving kindness, blessing yourself, which ultimately becomes the bigger, better offer reward that our brains, once we start doing it and we realize, hey, doing this loving kindness prayer, I feel a lot better doing that than getting really angry and flipping somebody the bird. Maybe I should start doing this other thing more, right? The brain is really good about picking up on bigger, better rewards. And so that's kind of the idea of hacking our habits, if you will. So anyways, I thought that was really interesting, and I'm personally trying to kind of work with some of that stuff in my own life. Particularly like with my kids, when they're getting upset or frustrated, and I notice that my blood pressure is starting to rise, really trying to return back to a deep breath, and just kind of get my executive functioning, my prefrontal cortex back online, because I can feel it like going into that fight, flight, or freeze part of the brain. I think we all have different habit loops that we could improve upon. So anyways, I hope that gives you a little food for thought on addressing anxiety and some of those bad habits. And let's begin. Welcome to this guided rain meditation for addressing anxiety and stress. I'm Dustin, and I will be your guide today. And RAIN stands for recognize, allow, investigate, and nurture. So we will be doing the traditional RAIN practice with a bit of a twist on the nurture part, inspired by Dr. Jud Brewer's Unwinding Anxiety. He actually uses a noting practice on the N part of RAIN. So we're going to do a noting and a nurture at the end of our RAIN practice. But I think you'll find that this practice it's really effective. It's not only finding greater peace and unwinding anxiety, but really kind of helping with reducing our cortisol, our stress hormone, increasing beneficial hormones like serotonin, which helps moderate sleep, increasing dopamine, which improves focus and memory. So there's a lot of health benefits with bringing awareness to our anxiety through a meditation practice, and especially RAIN practice. So, and just remember to, as we do this practice, if you ever feel uncomfortable or uneasy, you can always return to your breath as your foundation, as your guide. If the mind gets a little too chaotic, you can always come back to your breath to connect with the present moment. So let's get started with a few deep breaths. Deep breath in through the nose, filling up the diaphragm, and release. Releasing through the mouth. And inhale through the nose, filling up the belly, and release. Releasing through the mouth. And inhale through the nose, filling up the diaphragm, and release. So, first step of RAIN is to recognize, where we recognize what is coming up for us at the moment. It could be related to future thinking around anxiety, fear, uncertainty, stress. Could also be ruminating on past experiences that may be creating grief, guilt, shame. There may have been a triggering event, a stressful event recently that you haven't been able to shake off. Whatever that negative habit loop feeling that's coming to the surface, just allow that to be present. So recognizing where we're at and allowing that thought, that feeling to be present. And as we allow this feeling, whether it's anxiety, fear, stress, as we allow it to be, it's helpful to think of this emotion as not something negative that we need to push away, but rather an old friend that we allow into our house for a cup of tea. And the idea is our anxiety, our stress, our fear, these are all visitors that come to our temple to express their concerns. And rather than identifying with them or getting caught up in their narratives, we simply have tea with them, we sit down with them, and with compassion, like a friendly ear, we listen to their stories. Perhaps there's a lesson to learn through their stories. But we don't need to identify with the story. We don't need to live with the story. The story is not a part of us. It's simply a moment in time in our mind. So we allow whatever feeling is coming up for us, and then we investigate where that feeling or emotion is showing up in our body. But we don't need to psychoanalyze ourselves and understand the past of why we feel anxious or fearful. We don't need to go into the history. We really just want to connect with this present moment and with this feeling that we have and where it manifests in our bodies currently. And for stress or anxiety, you may feel maybe some tension in the head, maybe a headache, maybe a tightening in the chest, shortness of breath. Feel free to put a hand wherever you might feel that tension. If there's tension in the shoulders, feel free to put a hand on the shoulders and feel free to kind of rub the shoulders. Just kind of be there or wherever that feeling is arising. If you feel a tightening in the chest, you can bring a hand or two hands to your chest, to your heart area, and just connect with what that feeling is telling you. If that emotion, that fear, anxiety, worry, if it's showing up in a different part of the body, you can put a loving hand on your gut or wherever else it may be showing up. And we allow this feeling to be present. We investigate where it's showing up in the body. And we do this with nonjudgemental awareness, with a childlike curiosity. We don't judge ourselves or judge others for why we're experiencing this negative feeling. We simply bring awareness, which brings us to this breathing technique that Dr. Jud Brewer talks about in his book, Unwinding Anxiety. And it's similar to a mantra, similar to OM, But rather than doing Om, we do a kind of like we're curious. We're curious about our anxiety, our fear. We're just kind of inquisitive, saying, and it's a little silly, but it actually is a great way to kind of bring more innocent curiosity to some of these feelings that may feel heavy or dark at times. So you'll entertain me. Let's give this a try. So we breathe in and we say, and breathe in. And breathe in. Just bringing some curiosity to our suffering, wherever that suffering shows up for us. And which leads us to the N in rain, which is commonly known as the nurture phase, but also inspired by Dr. Jud. He talks about noting, and we simply note what has come up for us in our practice. So we don't need to identify it. We don't have to identify with it. We simply note what has come up for us. Noting, oh, there's my anxiety again. There's my fear again. There's my, you fill in the blank. Simply start to note what has come up for us. And then we move into nurture. We've noted what's come up for us. We've recognized, allowed, and investigated what has come up. And now we nurture with self-compassion, with that curiosity, And if you feel any aversion to the idea of nurturing yourself, do another Why do I feel aversion to nurture myself? We're often our worst critics. And this is not about critiquing ourselves. This is just about nurturing our wounds, healing ourselves to become more whole, to become more rooted in this present moment. That is the work of meditation, of rain, is we're becoming more rooted in this present moment. Not worrying about the future or dwelling on the past. Simply being fully present in this moment. Nurturing ourselves with compassion, empathy. And as we extend and expand that love for ourselves, that love starts to radiate to others in our circle of influence. And we can begin to show compassion and empathy for even those that may have triggered us or created some suffering in our lives? Can we learn from those teachers and find compassion and growth and healing for those people and through those experiences? This is the work. Connected to the breath, connected to the present moment, connected to the I behind the I, the self beyond the self. Connected to the universe, the most great spirit, whatever label you want to call it. We're connecting to a wider awareness and consciousness beyond our own narrow view. And in that space, we truly are all connected. We are all part of this human experience, and we're all going through different levels of suffering. And so we can show each other compassion as we walk this path of what it is to be a human being, not a human doing. We're always doing, and we just be a human being. So with that, I'd like to share with you a poem that I've written. The poem is entitled, Having Tea with My Anxiety. Developing in a developed society. First world problems and anxiety. They say I need more. Do I have enough? Filling up the space of silence with more stuff. Can't hear myself think. And when I do, the voice has me chasing false realities within a false choice. Chasing my tail, the monkey mind has me climbing the ladder to add a $sign. Add another layer to the narrative. It overcomplicates my imperative. For life, liberty in the pursuit of happiness. But I'm suffering from self-inflicted nastiness. My greatest barrier to being free is me, or the thoughts I identify as me. Like unwanted guests, I've barred their entrance, but now I invite them in for tea. Having tea with my anxiety and all of his friends. Listen to their stories, nurture and transcend. Let them be heard and speak their mind. All they really want is my attention and time. And when I acknowledge their presence and tell them it will be all right, they lift the veil from my lamp and return into the light. Return unto the source from where all truth resides. Absolve into the sea of love. Embrace the deep inside. Unconditional ocean, Mother holds us all, like children in her womb, till rebirth is our call. I no longer have to be the example of piety. I can love my faults, fears, and anxiety. When they come to visit, I can listen to their voice, but know beyond their ignorance, there is a better choice. And I can make that choice in every breath, to be at peace beneath the tides until there's nothing left. Nothing left but silence in the space of infinite possibilities. What will you do with your infinite possibilities? What will you do when you realize you are infinite? The light in me bows to the light in you. Namaste. Hey there, friend. If you enjoyed that session and would like to join me in real time, then go to openmindsopenhearts.org and sign up for my free classes the first and third Wednesday of each month at 5 p.m. Pacific time. I'd love to meet you in person via Zoom online for these sessions. Also, on my website, you can find past guided meditations. You can find my training sessions where I go deeper into the science and mindfulness practices around this content. You'll find my poetry for meditation, original music, and a variety of other resources to guide you on your meditation and mindfulness practice. So go to openmindsopenhearts.org, sign up, and I hope to see you at the next session.